Another common error made by ESL writers is shown in this slide, the next slide, that of sentence structure. And this is a rather broad type of error, and so I'll give several examples for it. Your goal as a writer, and that's shown in the next slide, is to remove ambiguity or uncertainty. Your reader should not have to pause ever in your reading to try to understand what was your point. So a good tip is to strive for continuity of ideas. In other words, you're discussing a point, don't jump around, discuss something, and then come back to that previous thought. Finish that thought and then move on. And this requires the appropriate use of punctuation, which can throw off your meaning if used inappropriately, and the appropriate use of transitional words. So in the next slide, I note that we should eliminate abrupt transitions. So changes in verb tense or strings of noun. Prepositional phrases are particularly tricky. More than two prepositions, and even two prepositional phrases in a row is bad in your writing. Pretty much after one preposition, it becomes difficult to follow what you mean, what you're referring to with each successive prepositional phrase. Now, likewise, use pronouns carefully. This, that, these, and those. That can be confusing, particularly if there was more than one similar item mentioned in the previous sentence or in the previous portion of the sentence. These are effective linkers, but be sure, absolutely sure, that your subject is clear when you use such a preposition. So on the next slide, we want to highlight the idea of using parallel construction. By parallel construction, we present things in a particular order, and then we present two or three ideas, so we always use the same means to refer to them. We don't want to change that around, because then the reader is left to interpret what exactly we mean. So let me give an example. We say that the cell counts for nucleus X were lower than nucleus Y. Well, we know cell counts for nucleus X, that's clear, but nucleus Y, are we now, do we mean the cell counts for nucleus Y, or do we mean nucleus Y? What exactly do we mean? We, of course, do mean cell counts for nucleus Y, so say that. Say the cell counts for nucleus X were lower than the cell counts for nucleus Y. Avoid colloquial expressions, and that idea is expressed in the next slide. Colloquialism is the use of common language that it's a characteristic of appropriateness of the spoken language, and then we apply that to our writing. So in other words, we try to make our writing seem less formal to be more friendly or informal. So this is fine in conversation, but in writing we need to follow a particular set of rules, and we should adhere to these rules. In the next slide, we want to consider the fact that we need to use quantitative writing rather than qualitative language whenever possible. For example, say 3 rather than a few. A few could mean 2, 3, 4. Some people even think 5 to 10 is a few. It depends on what you're discussing. Limit use of the third person. The editorial we. Anthropomorphic statements, which anthropomorphic means refers to or resembling a human being. So anthropoid, anthropomorphous, hominoid, or humanoid, or man-like. These are words that really don't say anything confidently, and there are better ways to state things in our sentence. In our next slide, I say what is, not what isn't. Sometimes you have to say what isn't, but often you can shorten and strengthen sentences just by saying what is. In other words, don't beat around the bush, just tell the reader what they need to know.